Hi, my name is Emeka. I'm the CEO and founder of Netacare. We have been supporting aged care, NDIS, and Department of Veteran Affairs individuals over the last 2 years, and we've been enjoying doing so. This is my story.
Welcome to Fair Go, your favourite podcast about building a better tomorrow. A podcast by the people, for the people, where we share small business stories from the business owners themselves. When you encounter unfair obstacles that are too hard to overcome on your own, remember, you don't have to do it alone. Together we can rebuild our great Southland and make Australia proud again. Join us today at novaxid.com.au.
Well, welcome to Fair Go, a podcast by the people, for the people. I came on a live for Facebook yesterday and promised you that I was going to have some extremely exciting information. I had a phone call with Emeka yesterday, and what he told me, I was like, oh my goodness, can we please do a video tomorrow? Can we please do another podcast interview? He has agreed. And so, Emeka, I have you in my hot little hands now, ready to give me an interview. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So we had Emeka on, it was just before Christmas. Unfortunately, I was on the road, and so we had a few tech issues with sound, which rookie error, live and learn. But we're now back in the studio and won't have any issues with sound. So I would love to get you, Emeka, to fill us in as to when we first met you. You were operating and still are operating as an NDIS disability support agency. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yep. And because you had a critical staff shortage, you had gotten your legal department together and you had talked through what are our options as an organisation. And because of the critical staff shortage, you decided, not because you were virtue signaling or anything like that, that you actually needed to be able to employ jabbed and unjabbed workers. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely.
And how did that actually work out for you? Because we haven't spoken since then. I know last time we talked, we put a link up for people who are unjabbed to actually apply to work for your agency. And I haven't heard back since then. So what's happened since our last conversation?
So we got quite a number of applications coming through, and obviously there is a bit of a filter process that we got through to make sure that we're getting the right people through the door, making sure that we're filtering through time wasters. We put out an application form for people to fill out. So we've gotten a really good amount of response from that. We are having phone inquiries coming through and saying, hey, are you guys really employing people that are not vaccinated? And look, for us, we are not going to say, a blanket defined statement to the government that we will be doing what you tell us not to do regardless. That's how misinformation are spread. And so we're doing our best to control the narrative that we are putting out as an organization. So what we are saying is that we will employ regardless of the decision that you are choosing to make for your own bodily autonomy. You just need to put in the application and we will filter the process through, and you will be selected for an interview if you meet all the criteria and so on and so forth. But that is what we are doing.
And have you had any issues with that stance? Because I know everyone's going to be wondering that. Have you had, people barricading on your door or anything like that?
No, not really. I'll be interested to see who wants to take up the challenge in challenging our processes in the system that we are going through at the moment. But there just hasn't been any of that at all. Simply because I think, and it's not even a matter of I think, there is a market shortage, like a gross shortage of carers. There is a study that was out, last quarter of the year, last year in 2021, that showed that individual informal carers are seeing people's family and friends who are volunteering their time to care for people with a disability or people with aged care. There was a survey that was done that showed that informal carers are actually providing a significant portion of the care for their loved ones because there's just not enough carers out there to provide these services. So for us, the demand keeps growing. we are having to transition people out of the hospital into care. And when you look at some of the needs around these individuals, the demand is so big that we just don't even have time to humor anyone who is, trying to come up against it. But I think there is a community sense that they are vulnerable people that we are genuinely trying to do our best for. So we haven't had anyone who comes up against that at all. So it's been good.
That's great. And I want to go back just briefly. You said that you were getting people out of the hospital. Is there anything, conspiracy theory about that, or is that just what happens in the disability support sector, that you do get people transitioning from hospital care to in-home care?
That's exactly right. No, there is no conspiracy theory around that at all. So in fact, just before the holidays, we had a fairly significant case that we are now working this month to transition into care. But, people generally are at home and they don't even know that they need support. They're receiving minimal support. And their conditions get really bad. They end up in the hospital. They're stuck in the hospital for 2 months until a provider like us will be contacted and asked to transition them out into a home, especially disability accommodation type facility.
Right. So without the support of in-home care through the NDIS sector or informal care, which you have just said is really buckling under the strain, our hospitals are going to be inundated with people who should be having in-home care, which means that acute issues, there will be a wait on beds. Is that right?
Absolutely. In fact, in the Ipswich Hospital, when I was there in starting the transition for this case I spoke of, the whole situation was that they actually created a whole new ward to house these people that are just stuck in the hospital system. They refurbished and created an entire area for it, and so for some of these individuals, the amount of support that they are requiring, even the hospital system is unable to actually adequately service it. And not just that, it is actually far more expensive for the hospital system to manage these cases than for a support service provider to manage the cases. So it is certainly coming very hard under the weight, and people are waiting to get into the hospital, then they get stuck there, then they're waiting to get into a provider because providers are not available, no suitable accommodation, not enough carers. Yeah, there's a whole swarm of things there.
And so really, this is not what Netacare is doing. It is not a political statement. It is people need help. Our health system is buckling under the strain, and we need to step in so that people who are generally well can actually have a bed if they need to go into hospital.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And like I said before, I'd really love to see anyone who is coming up against that notion, because our heart in the birthing even of Netacare was simply to truly care for people. And I mentioned last time in our last conversation that I myself, when I got out of the military, I suffered from an injury that left me with a severe chronic neck and back and shoulder injury that has really seen me suffering from time to time. And I look at, the degeneration that it's causing in my body, and I'm thinking, if this gets any worse, I'm going to need care. So what do I want my care to look like, in 20, 30 years when I can't handle my body anymore? Hopefully more, but what do I want my care to look like? And I take that heart into the way we care for people. So it is simply that we are doing.
Wow. And how much, you might not be able to put an entire figure on it, but what would you say, if you could ballpark it, what would you say your percentage that your business has grown since deciding that care is actually more important than someone's own personal medical decision with regards to the jab?
Look, I think if I could percentage it, I think we've grown significantly, and we've experienced an exponential growth right from the start. So I think when people are seeing that we're supporting a notion of just basic human rights, really, people are gravitating towards us and requesting that we care. In fact, it was interesting for me because we look after aged care as well. So, and we meet and follow all our compliance legislation that we need to in providing care to our aged population. But it was interesting for me to look at a lot of the notion around why things have gone the way they've gone is about protecting the vulnerable. But the vulnerable are like, our protection means that we get our care. Like, our protection doesn't mean that you take away people because they're making choices, because those people are still safe to look after us.
Yes.
And if they're feeling unwell, like any other illness, they will stay home until they're better. And I want my carer. So I think we continue to grow quite significantly, and our inquiries for our services have grown even further since, like I said, we haven't really made a bold statement that we define government. We're just supporting people. That's what we do. That's what we have to do. So that's been that.
And that's what it should have always been from the very start. It should never have become this massive political campaign. It should have always been what is best for the individual. So how are you going with the people in the aged care sector? Are they still very frightened about COVID? Are they doing better now? Like, what's that going for?
Yeah, look, if surprisingly, there's actually not a great percentage of the aged population that are freaking out about this. There just isn't. Like, I suppose it's interesting because these are people who have been, they're older now and they've been around, they've seen a lot of things, so nothing really surprises them anymore. So they're like, if you're sick, you're sick, whatever, just get better and look after me. Like, there is, we have a couple that, they know that, and we know that they have additional complications. So we're really careful in how we service them, in making sure that our support staff are feeling well when they attend and all of that sort of stuff. So, but other than those individuals, and really we put the onus on ourselves as a healthcare provider to make sure that we are following all of our requirements for their safety as much as possible. Other than those ones, it's very interesting to watch how they really don't care. They literally just want to be cared for. Like,
that's awesome.
This whole thing just seems to be putting even more strain on them as individuals.
Yes.
And, I had one say to me the other day, it's interesting, when did the government become our GP? Like, in the past, when you were sick, you just go see your GP and your GP tells you what to do. Now, when someone is sick, they jump on the internet and search what the government is saying today, which can change in every given moment, it seems. And I found the question really interesting. When did the government become our GP?
Yeah.
That's so true. People are not going to their GPs to go and get treatments. They're literally Googling,
right?
Like, what is the government saying about my symptoms right now? Like, right. And I thought, you're right. These people have really been around the woods. They've seen some things. And as much as this isn't a surprise for a lot of them, some of them are being impacted because they're not able to see family and friends. And they are in the latter part of their lives where they really just want to be spending time with their family and friends. And that is affecting them quite significantly.
Yeah, that's really tough. And we were talking about your last week and a half. How's that gone for you?
I contacted COVID out of nowhere, it seems, and like it seems to be wild spreading at the moment, and every second person gets it, which I actually really find reassuring, and I hope the community does as well, because it does mean that if everyone eventually gets it, we all just get over the fear of what it is. It seems like there's a lot of the way a lot of people are behaving at the moment is this safetyism culture, this I need to be safe, and this incredible amount of fear. But I sincerely believe once everyone gets it and sees that it's literally you'll be fine. Like I was in bed for 3 days with a fever, and my entire family got it. I was the worst reaction. I
Wow.
got 3 days of fever, and that was literally the worst with headaches. You know, people will react to it differently. Both of my kids, none of them. Well, actually, I have 3 kids. My baby, who I just had, but even her got it. She got COVID as well. But out of 3 of them, they were like nothing happened. They were just keeping calm and carrying on. And my son had a bit of a cough and a sneeze, and that disappeared within 2 days. My daughter had a sneeze, and they didn't even get fevers.
Wow.
So it really isn't that bad, but there's just so much fear that is nurturing every decision that people make these days. So I guess if I'm to share my COVID story, seriously, don't be scared. I had it literally 3 days ago. Like,
You should have called me up. I could have come around and you could have sneezed on me, and then I could have had my little antibodies as well.
yeah, look, I had some people offer to pay so I could sneeze on them, but I thought of my own germs. Thanks.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I have kept the people waiting long enough because they're like, get to your news, get to your news, get to your news. So we had a phone conversation yesterday. You told me some extremely exciting news. I went to Facebook and said, guys, this system is crumbling. It's only been since the 17th of December, and this is already happening now. Could you please elaborate? And I will put links in so they can go and verify it for themselves. This is not hearsay. This is direct from a governmental website. I'll probably screenshot it because they might change their minds and change the website again. But as of now, what is the government actually saying? And why does that mean that the system is crumbling? And why is that exceptionally good news for NDIS workers? Because I have had a couple of people in the inbox saying, I'm literally about to lose my job today or at the end of this week. I hope you've got good news for me. And I said, I think I do.
Yeah. So, well, if you were listening to watch the Prime Minister do his announcements yesterday, some of this stuff you can pick up from it very quickly. But essentially, around the different states, and New South Wales probably has gone to the furthest end with this, but in Queensland, which is what we are, they've made a decision to essentially that all healthcare workers that work within the hospital system, even if they're a close contact, unless they're symptomatic, that they actually are feeling like they're dying and have COVID, that they're to return back to work. So before this, if you didn't know, if you were any sort of a close contact, you know, a neighbor of a neighbor's friend has it, you had to go home and quarantine for, 14 days, which then got changed to 7 days. But they have now literally changed it to say close contact or not, unless you're symptomatic, you need to go back to work. And this is in the healthcare system and within the hospitals, which is a really interesting phenomenon, because if you think about it, they're calling people who are close contact who very well could have the disease and are just not symptomatic. Like my wife, she wasn't symptomatic, but she was infected. And it's interesting that as long as those people don't have symptoms and they're close contact, they can go back to work. And, they put all these caveats around it to make it seem like they are trying to safeguard, whatever it is. But the interesting fact for me, for people to start realizing out of this, is that if they are calling back close contact staff, is because there is a significant staffing shortage in our healthcare system. And there is because there's a whole bunch of individuals who chose to actually not keep working if they're going to force them to take the vaccine for good reasons, and it's their choice. And if that is the case, I will see a world in the not too distant future where we will see, the unvaccinated individuals that they've told to please go away, to return back to work. Because the fact is, the system can handle only so much when there is a circulation of an illness the way it is circulating at the moment and starting to really push that pressure on. It will only handle so much before it will crumble, and you will see the highly educated, highly experienced individuals that have had to leave will be getting called back in the not too distant future. It's interesting to me that they will rather, at this point anyway, they will rather call back close contact than unvaccinated individuals. In fact, if you look at a news article that was put on yesterday, said in Queensland there was about 100 and I think 60 something people that were in the hospital with COVID. And out of 160 something, there was only 36 that were actually unvaccinated, which means that there's a high percentage of people with vaccine, and you will start to see that reaction of the vaccine being even further in people. So I don't think it's too much longer. In New South Wales, they are actually calling back doctors and nurses, regardless of whether they actually have tested positive. And as long as they're not symptomatic, they're calling them back into work. So again, super interesting to watch some of this stuff play out. But I think you will soon see that will play out into our industry as well, when they will lack some of those rules around whether unvaccinated people can work or not, all that sort of stuff. So
yes. And this is why I set up the call to talk about a critical staff shortage. This is not a political decision. This is not rah decision. This is a critical staff shortage. We have people that need care, and it's a waiting game. And right now, we have outweighted the government sufficiently so that you say, well, Rebecca, this is not I know that, but we just said that close contacts couldn't be around anyone. Now they can. It's only a little bit more of a waiting game before they have to acknowledge that they need the unvaccinated people as well because of the critical staff shortage, right?
Absolutely. It's going to happen. And I think we saw that being the case, and we were already experiencing that right at the start. So it only made sense for us to do that. But now the hospitals as well are really starting to get that, because it is spreading like wildfire. So it is going to get to almost every doctor, every nurse, and you will have, 50% of people will react adversely, the others won't. But when that does happen, that critical mass will cause something to break.
Do you have, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but do you have an inkling as to how long do you think this is going to take?
Excuse me, I'm not a one for predictions, but I think if we watch what has happened from when that decision was made from the 17th of January for December, it hasn't actually lasted a month till that has happened. And you can see that the government is trying to do a lot of different, plug in the holes to try and solve things very quickly. I'll give you an example. So one of the things that they said that workers that are unvaccinated that we choose to keep employing need to do is take a daily PCR test, which we all know is insane in itself as a thing to do. However, we are now, for those staff that are trying to meet that requirement, they're all being turned away from testing facilities. And in fact, the Prime Minister announced yesterday that if you're not symptomatic and if you're not a close contact, unless you've tested already with a rat and tested positive, do not go and get a test at a PCR site, because they're running short and they're running out, and they don't want to be able to give it to you. They're pushing everyone towards the rat, the rapid antigen test, which is it's a 15-minute test that's going to become the thing that is used over the next 2 weeks, like the Prime Minister announced yesterday. But you will find that there's a lot of relapse in the decision making and changing, and a lot of knee-jerk reactions. Yes. And like my good friend put yesterday, the gentleman I was speaking that we care for, he said, when the government become our GPs. And so this is what happens when the government decides to become the GP for a population of people. Yes. There needs to be a lot of knee-jerk reaction to answer questions, because they're not going to the right place anymore for their answers. So if you see what has happened, it hasn't taken a month for it to get here. I think we will see some really rapid stuff start to move again by the time we even hit February.
Yes. So, a lot of saving face, I think, as well. That's just my personal opinion.
It seems like it's easier to back down and just go, we were wrong, we're sorry, like we may have stuffed this, but it's like trying to cover up a lie with a lie, and it's just not good. Like you end up going, what was my first lie again?
Yes. So true.
And if people can't see that's what's happening, then I don't know what will make them see it.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are waking up, and we've all been asleep at the wheel. And unfortunately, had we have woken up with the 2 weeks to flatten the curve, we might not be in this position now, but that's okay.
Don't even mention that.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to nutshell it again for people who are still going, well, I mean, that's not that exciting. No. Emeka has taken the critical staff shortage route. He has taken a very sensible route. He has gotten good legal advice, and he is doing fine, and his business is actually growing. He is able to employ people, whether they are jabbed or unjabbed, not based on political virtue signalling, but on the fact that he has a critical staff shortage. Now, the government, who have taken the narrative, a very strong narrative, that COVID is terrible, 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 even they are now having to acknowledge, by bringing close contacts back into the hospital system, that it's unraveling and that we have a critical staff shortage. So it has already started to crumble with good common sense, critical staff shortage arguments. And it does bear very, very good news that it is going to continue on. And I feel very, very strongly about that. If I didn't, I wouldn't have brought you on to talk to you today if I thought it was just potentially a red herring. But when you're seeing this kind of stuff on the governmental website, I mean, is it really about a disease or is it not? Because if it really was, then, none of it really makes sense.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
Yeah. I think we've lost the point that the lie, we remember what the lie
yes.
is. So now we're just cycling back till we eventually tell the truth.
Yeah, so true. So are you still hiring people who are unemployed right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I was talking to you about this before, and we have a system that we've developed in order to make sure that we capture the right people to come through our system, because one of the reasons that it's easy to suffer critical workforce shortage in this industry is that if you have the wrong people come in, it is worse. It is so much worse. So I hope people appreciate that fact that we will continue to employ, we'll continue to vet people, and it does take some time for us to actually pull that through and get the right people onboarded. But we are doing the best that we can, especially with having to transition people out of the hospital. We're absolutely doing the best we can.
So good. Well, I'd love to touch base with you again in a couple of months when we can be on the other side of the next back-peddling statement that is made. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'll put the link in for them to sign up to the form so that they can get an email from you folks. And I'm glad that you're still alive after the dreaded COVID virus, and your family's still alive as well. That's
yes, we are well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much once again for your time, and look forward to the next time we touch base with Emeka from Netacare.
Thank you.
Have you got an inspiring story to tell? Register your business now for your chance to be featured on our Fair Go podcast. Ready to lend a helping hand? That's great. You can chip in through the website. Remember, 100% profit goes directly back into local small business. Together, we can rebuild this great Southland for ourselves and the next generation. Go to novaxid.com.au.